We're gonna start in 3, 2, 1,
and start.
I have to mention this. The last episode, we really had the ultimate irony, right? Because it was on communication, and we wrote up our after action report, and it turns out that our biggest issue was communication.
And also kind of audio, the levels were off. So I was extremely loud. I myself couldn't even listen to the whole thing.
That's right. But we learned a lot of lessons.
We did learn.
We grew as an organization.
We've implemented changes.
We don't want to blame anyone. This is not about blame.
Nope, we're not here to blame. This is a fault-free zone podcast. Fault. So 2 weeks in a row, this is a world record.
It's awesome for us.
Podcasts.
We are organized. We're on it.
We go 8 months in between episodes, and then all of a sudden we have 2 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, George R. R. Martin should do as well.
So probably after this, we'll go back to once a month.
The problem is going to be, today we're talking about food defense, which probably means, based on our historic record from last time, we're going to have catastrophic food emergencies during this entire episode. People are going to steal our beer. Yep. It's going to be horrible.
We're going to get massive food poisoning.
There's going to be starvation, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It's going to be messy.
We're excited to introduce Jason Bashura. Hey, Jason, are you there?
Gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, good day.
Yes.
You should get to say his title.
So this is probably the coolest title of a guest we've had on here, but Jason, your title, in case you weren't aware of it, Senior Manager of Global Food Defense for PepsiCo. That's awesome. Welcome.
And before PepsiCo, Jason was at FDA. I've known him for, I feel like actually more years than I can say at that point. Am I old enough now that I can say more years than I can say? And that before FDA, he worked in all kinds of places, state public health, local public health. He's been working in this field since 2002.
Yeah, and so Jason, how did you get into food defense, or maybe tell us what exactly is food defense?
Well, thanks for that very kind introduction. I got into food defense, which was then in 2002, 2003 was called food biosecurity. I was working in government, state of Connecticut at the time, and we were looking at trying to prevent intentional acts of adulteration of food. And so biosecurity was the CDC buzzword at the time. We had bioterrorism preparedness, and I just sort of kept my irons in the fire and kept working with a lot of folks, different associations. That's where I actually crossed paths with Mitch through NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, and the rest is history.
Now, was biosecurity or food defense really a thing pre-9/11?
Well, there was, to some degree, food bioterrorism readiness or awareness. There had been an event back in the mid-'80s, 1984 actually, in the Dalles, Oregon, where, and you could look it up at Google, it's open source info, where there was a cult that had used salmonella to intentionally contaminate salad bars in an attempt to influence a local election. They were trying to gain some seats on the county board because they wanted to do some significant alterations to their compound, as it were. And, well, their attempts didn't work, but they certainly made a lot more than 700 people sick. And while they didn't win the election as they'd hoped, it certainly brought to light some significant vulnerabilities.
I want to talk about how you got into this field a little more, but since you brought it up, let's dig into the Dalles, right? I think you told us right before the show, this is like the classic case study of food bioterrorism, or an episode of food. What do I even call it? Of a crazy people salad bar attack. So what the thing about the Dalles, right, is that this cult was loony, right? This was the Rajneeshi cult. Is that am I saying that the right way?
You pronounced that pretty well.
All right, good. It's because I did that for 6 hours. 6 hours today. I've been trying to say Rajnishi over and over again. And first they delivered it through glasses of water first, and then the salad bars came. How did they produce it? Do you know what I mean? Was this just something? Did they have a barn? Were they in a field?
Yeah,
How do you make this much salmonella?
Well, before I get there, I have to bust out my Swiss Army knife and my bottle opener because, hold on a second.
Are you making salmonella right now?
There you go.
Hold on. Beer break.
So what happened was they had some obviously pretty smart people on staff, scientists, microbiologists, what have you, and before they actually intentionally contaminated the salad bars that you referred to, they were targeting the water supply, thinking that would be a way that they can make a lot of people sick, in addition to glasses of water, trying to make people sick. That way they were spraying the salmonella on doorknobs and door handles of public places and things of that sort. So they actually had a pretty well thought out plan, but it was just in the execution that they weren't able to realize the results that they intended. But when they got to the salad bars, the economic disruption there was significant. Lots of small mom and pops were put out of business, and folks were literally ruined because of all the people that had taken ill. And it's unfortunate. And I'm not sure if in doing your research, Mitch, did you figure out how they were actually able to figure it out?
Yeah, that was my next question, is how did they get caught, and how soon after the attack were they?
Well, first, this is my favorite part of the story, is that the way they delivered the salmonella after they cultured it in this local lab is that they just had a plastic bag with like brown liquid in it, and they just poured that on the salad bar.
And nobody saw them?
And nobody noticed this. They were just stealthy enough that they just poured brown liquid all over the salad bars. And I feel like
there were different approaches that the different case studies. There was actually a CDC paper on that as well, that whether or not it was poured on or sprayed on, droplets, or however it was introduced into the different items in the salad bar. But yeah, you've got to wonder, were they staking out the joints to see when folks weren't looking, or were they doing it inconspicuously? Or if food workers were attentive to what was going on, did they see something and not say something,
Right.
And getting into your question about the so this is how this part went down, which was there was an investigation of salmonella the CDC led, and they sort of declared it, well, it's a natural outbreak. A lot of people got sick. It happens. They blamed it on food contamination. And then the Oregon congressman at the time was suspicious of the cult. And, because he was suspicious of the cult, he wouldn't let it go. And he thought the cult was acting out. He knew they were trying to politically pressure it. He thought they were acting suspiciously. And he kept calling doctors at the CDC over and over again.
This is back when Congress was active. This is the last time Congress actually did something.
That's right. And he called them for more than a year. And finally, he gave a speech in Congress in '85. So this is the next year. And in that year, he blamed the Rajneeshis for contaminating the salad bar ingredients. So before the investigation had been conducted, he called them out in Congress, and then laid out this whole thing. And so finally, he was able to provoke an investigation by the sheriff's office there. But it wasn't until September of '85.
Yeah, and it was quite. I think it was just over a year later. And so when the feds arrived, they actually found vials of the same matching strain in the refrigerator, and they had their evidence, and then it just came to be that one of the lead, I guess there was a woman, her name escapes me now, but she was called the princess or the enchantress or something along those lines, where she was, she was found to have been responsible for either masterminding the plot or whatever. But after she was released from jail, and this gets crazy, she was actually the administrator of nursing homes or something like that.
Oh my!
I'm not kidding.
The salmonella enchantress. They're running your nursing home. Be warned.
Something like that. Yeah.
That is crazy. And the thing about that story is, it sounds so paranoid, and yet it was totally right. It makes me worry that we're not paranoid enough about cults.
Colts or salad bars?
Well, both. I'm already
okay,
paranoid about salad bars.
This is kind of why I never eat salad.
I know. In Florida, actually, when I was working for environmental health there, none of the people in environmental health would eat at salad bars. Nobody ate salad bars. Nobody ate oysters. Those were the two things everybody avoided.
Jason, do you eat out?
I was actually just thinking about that tonight. My kids are very athletically busy between softball and gymnastics and baseball, basketball, you name it. So, we have our favorite places that we bring food into our home from retail establishments. Yes,
sure. Yeah.
I won't eat sushi like Mitch's EH buddies. I won't eat raw shellfish, and there's a pretty select regular that we know that we enjoy.
Yeah. So you do eat out. So this line of work doesn't just completely throw you off.
Do you eat at salad bars? Let's get real here, Jason. Do you eat at salad bars?
When I'm at PepsiCo World Headquarters in Purchase, New York, I do, and it's very good.
There you go. So let's go back. Yeah.
You've got to know what you're doing. I mean, if you go to a place that looks like the food has been sitting out all day, I mean, not from a bioterrorism concern or, somebody's going to have intentionally contaminated the food. You've got to know if that cottage cheese looks like it's been there for a while, it's kind of ripe. Yeah, maybe it's not a smart move.
Right.
Sort of like what is gas station sushi, you know what I mean? What are you doing?
Oh, I love gas station sushi.
Yeah,
It's
or
my
Mets,
favorite kind of sushi.
City Field sushi. The City Field where the Mets play, they now serve sushi.
That's gourmet, though. I hear that is high class baseball sushi.
Yeah, but that's good advice. If the potato salad at the all-you-can-eat bar has a film over it, probably stay away.
That's right. So. Just let's talk about your story then. So, tell us more specifically how you got into this field. What inspired you to do it?
Wow. Well, September the 11th, we all remember where we were. I was in food inspector recertification class in New Haven, Connecticut, right on the Long Wharf. I was working in Newtown at the time, and I called my boss, and I was like, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? And he's like, well, if you're going to take time off, it's going to be personal leave because you got to come back to the office. I said, well, they're closing down the state. He said, so I took the rest of the day off, and I stopped at my church, and I went home and tried to figure out which end was up. We were very pregnant at the time. My wife was 7-8 months pregnant with our son, and we sat there as everybody else did, and we cried watching TV, and we've all got those memories. But the next day was, how does this relate to what I do, local public health, environmental health, and looking at things differently. So not to say that there was that automatic air of suspicion, but knowing what I knew, what I did on a regular basis, going in and out of restaurants, never really thought that this is something that could happen here, but you never know. So I was fortunate enough that one day I got a call from a colleague of mine, Ron Grimes from NEHA. He asked me to represent NEHA on a newly founded national coordinating council looking at food and agriculture sector criticality as it relates to intentional contamination or bioterrorism, what have you. And I was floored. I said, of course I would. And that was how NEHA, thank you, gave me my big start as a local public health practitioner into that federal audience. And I went to meetings and I asked questions, and I wouldn't stop asking questions. And I think I just gained that reputation for speaking before I thought, but asking questions that needed to be heard regardless of whether or not I wanted to hear the outcome. And so I kept on pressing. And so as the fates would have it, about 4 or 5 years later, I got a call from the FDA, and I was offered a job, an opportunity that I didn't even apply for. It was a direct hire, so I didn't even apply for the job. And it was a wonderful opportunity, but for the sake of my work with NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, that gave me that opportunity to have met those folks in the federal government. And the job with the FDA gave me the opportunity to interface with all sorts of folks across the country. And many of those folks are folks that I work with even still today at PepsiCo, but some of these folks also work in other major industry, food and beverage industry across the country, and they have global responsibilities as well. So it's been an interesting journey. I describe my job as food safety meets homeland security. It's fun, it's exciting, it's scary, it's troublesome, it's worrisome, but it's very it's challenging because you don't know. Every day there's something else to be thinking about or working on or trying to fix or solve or prevent,
Yeah, and in your bio and some of the articles you've written online, you talk about a personal hero of yours, Rick Rescorla, who was in the World Trade Centers. Could you talk a little bit about him, how he influenced you, what you kind of take from his life, an example?
Yeah. So for your listeners that aren't aware of who Rick is, and I'm getting goosebumps standing here thinking about it. So God rest his soul, but. Rick he's a true American hero who helped save nearly 3,000 lives on September the 11th because of his perseverance and tenacity, some characteristics that I bring to the table every day, but his perseverance was for readiness and preparedness in the event of worst case scenario for those persons that were under his charge, at the World Trade Center. And so he would coordinate through his security office, emergency drills, the elevators are out, power outage, water, ice, you name it, whatever they could come up with, they dreamt up all of these different exercises. And I know, Andrew, your proficiency with, readiness and preparedness and exercises and the like. So, his ideas were that when they had to do the work to save their life legitimately, that it would not be a stress because they would have been used to it because of the exercises and the drills that they would do on a Friday afternoon at 3:45 of a holiday weekend, and everybody would be livid, flipping out. But you never know when that worst day is going to happen or what's going to occur. So
right.
And there's so many stories of heroes that day, and the gentleman with the red bandana, and I cry every time I see that on the ESPN. And you think about what these people did in sacrificing their lives to save others. And, what I do is I love my job. I work with some great folks, and I've got the opportunity, I think, to help shape the discussion and the conversation moving forward in the face of recently released regulations in the Food Safety Modernization Act and the intentional adulteration rule. And it comes down to just committing to knowing what we need to do and not wavering from that. And Rick, personally has inspired me, and as I shared with you last week in preparation for our discussion today, he's a personal hero of mine, and folks that don't know him, they need to understand why he thought and why he did what he did. And I've ended presentations that I've done in the last 10 years by asking people, who is your Rick Rescorla?
Mm-hmm.
Charging them with that internalized, okay, everybody's got a Rick Rescorla that they look to that they think is going to be the guy with the bugle, with the bullhorn, or maybe a bugle, or, whatever the case might be. But, who is that person that thinks a little left of center, is looking for zebras when everybody else is looking for horses, or thinking curveballs and everybody else is thinking fastballs? We've all got a Rick Rescorla. And I think those persons that are thinking about and sort of playing chess in their mind on day-to-day operations are those that we want to encourage in your strategic planning or your emergency readiness teams or what have you. So, Rick is, and actually the Department of Homeland Security, they had recently terminated an award that they had established in his honor, the Rick Rescorla Award of Resilience. And I challenged a colleague at DHS a few months ago, and I said, "Why is this award gone?"
Yeah.
And they didn't have an answer. They didn't have an answer for me.
Yeah,
So
I didn't know they terminated that.
Okay, you know what? I feel a cause coming on. I think we should do our first Dukes of Hazzards campaign, and it should be to reinstate the Rick Rescorla Award at the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, if you don't know about his life, look him up. Rick Rescorla. He just an incredible life, an incredible career, and gave his life, to save other lives during 9/11. So that's horrible. They discontinued that award.
I'm serious. Hashtag campaign. Dukes of Hazzards listeners, we're gonna go after Homeland Security for the Rick Rescorla Award. I'm calling. Well,
no joke. I'm not kidding you. This. I literally sent an email this afternoon, completely unrelated to our discussion here tonight, because I had some other dealings that I was working with them on. And I inquired and I said, I asked about this a few months ago and I haven't heard anything, and I'd really like to re-engage on this discussion. That meeting was in April, and I talked to them again in early June, end of May, and so here it goes again. It's been another 6 weeks, so we'll figure it out.
Well, keep in touch.
If that's something that you're gonna get involved with, I could give you more than you could imagine, and we could see what we could do.
I'm serious. Let's do it. I mean, our industry needs more Rick Rescorlas.
That's right. We need
his
heroes.
Story needs to be told. So
there you go.
We'll get people on.
With all due respect, the gentleman with the red bandana, his name is Wells Crowther, and Wells was the young man from Boston College who was always known to have carried his red bandana, and he was, again, an American hero. So, yeah, there you go. So as that relates to what I do every day, I mean, that was the day my life changed, and as we all think about, what do we do differently today, and what do you do differently from yesterday? But I loved my job on September the 10th, 2001, the day before the world changed, and I love my job today. And here I am talking to the Dukes. I mean, come on, does it get better? Does it get better than that?
That's right.
No way. So let's talk about looking for zebras. So I mean, just like nobody thought about. I mean, this isn't actually true. We could do a whole set of shows on this. People thought about planes flying into the World Trade Centers, but just because it wasn't part of public consciousness, right? And in the same way, I don't know that intentional food attacks are part of public consciousness. But I mean, in your article about the expanding umbrella of food defense, you cite, the 96 event of the lab workers in Texas, the 2009 40 folks in Kansas getting ill from a restaurant employee. What's changed in the field? Like, how is food defense different now than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
I'm not sure if I lost you guys. How is food defense different today from when it was?
10 years ago or 15 years ago. What are the tools you've got to do the job?
Wow, I think it's just the expanding knowledge base of risk. Food defense risk within the manufacturing environment. Also looking at both ends of the spectrum. I mean, where is our food coming from? A farm in Idaho, or is it coming from somewhere in Indonesia and being represented as fresh from the Gulf of Mexico? You know what I mean? So there's lots of ways to look at how we've changed and modified our views on things. And to go back a few years ago with Horsegate and what had happened in Europe with the ground beef and the horse meat, and sure, the opportunity was there, but did anybody ever really think that they were going to be putting ground horse meat into ground beef? And so, the tools of awareness, and I think our breadth of knowledge based on what could occur, having that ability to, sometimes I refer to it as like a crystal ball, what's the next thing that we should be looking out for? It'd be nice to have a heads up or an epiphany the night before and say, hey, we should be thinking about this. But what sort of food defense risk analyses are being done, or how is Pepsico different from insert major food manufacturer here? We're all working with the same basis of information that we generate with information sharing and collaborations amongst ourselves, getting information from government. But you could look at a month and a half, 2 months ago, where there was a situation in Michigan where a gentleman was arrested for having allegedly intentionally contaminated produce in salad bars and grocery stores for a period of 2 or 3 weeks. How do you know what to worry about next? Where are there weaknesses that could be exploited?
Let's talk about this. My old mouse poison guy. So what happened with mouse poison guy? How did he do what he did?
Yeah, I don't know about calling him mouse poison guy, but
sorry. What's a better disease? What would be his Donald Trump nickname? That's
oh boy. He'd probably refer to him by the color of his shirt or his eyes or something. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right.
But there's more to that story, I think, than what we realize. And apparently there was open source news on there where family had been seeking to have him provided some mental health assistance. And so I guess he thought that people were using food to control his mind, and so he was gonna show them. But if folks wanted, they could Google that or open source search for that story if they're not familiar with it. But that had lasted when they found, you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
When they found, or when the astute food worker saw that he was doing something that appeared to be out of ordinary, and that food worker reported it to their supervisor, they saw something, they said something, and that's when, they went back and reviewed video and figured it out. But how do you know when something else is about to occur or has occurred? And, if it's a foodborne illness, that presents like a regular foodborne illness, but it's really bad, how do you know it's not intentional?
Right.
So you got to have that suspicion hat on. And, when I was with the FDA, working closely with CDC to try to figure out some of those indicators of what could be a bad situation about to unfold. But, what do you worry about next, I guess, is a good way to put it.
The magnitude of this hazard or, potential disaster just seems so huge. I mean, if you look at protecting the food, I mean, mechanically, how does that happen, especially overseas food that it comes into the U.S.? Does the FDA have inspectors overseas? Does it get inspected once it comes into the country?
There are new FDA posts that have been stood up globally in the last 5 or 6 years. But as food is coming into port, I mean, you could open source search this. I believe it's less than 5% of food that's incoming is inspected, and so there's different requirements as far as importing of food. There's new FSMA Food Safety Modernization Act. There's an acronym check. Legislation, the new rule that requires foreign suppliers to verify what's being imported, and so there's lots of talk about tools. I mean, the regulation is the tool, but it encourages and requires industry to be more transparent and clear and upfront with where the food has come from, how was it handled, where was it processed, and where did it go, the ability to trace back and trace forward in the event of an outbreak or a recall or what have you. So the tools are sort of evolving as, I guess, that the food system transparency it becomes more visible, and people are more aware of thinking about where did this come from.
Right.
The strawberries that you have in your grocery store, in January, they probably aren't from within a 5-hour ride of you. And 2 days ago, were they on 3 continents away? Is that possible? Well, yeah. So
what's amazing to me, actually, when you look at these incidents we're talking about, the specific ones, so the Michigan incident, and this was just in May, was he was spraying this combination of hand sanitizer, mouse poison, and water, again on open food bars. The Kansas incident was it was at a Mexican restaurant, contaminated salsa, I think, in that case, right? And it was acute onset of vomiting, nausea, dizziness.
And that was crazy because it was like 20 minutes.
Right.
Within
incredibly
people
fast.
eating it.
And then yeah.
That was in the Kansas Department of Agriculture and local police, and EMS was overwhelmed initially because, like you said, Andrew, so many folks were taken ill so suddenly, and then the local environmental health came in, they voluntarily closed, they did their investigation, and they ironically, believe it or not, the admission was that it was a failed backflow preventer on a carbonator for a soda machine. So when they did their investigation, and then they found that the carbonator the backflow prevention that stopped the carbonated water from going back into the copper lines was either installed improperly, or it had failed, or it was missing, or I forget the details.
Nope, we're losing you.
So it made sense.
Nope. So you're saying they found an explanation that seemed like it makes sense, that was unintentional, right?
Correct.
So how did they figure out that it was intentional?
After the ambulances came back a few weeks later, and there was like 60 people sick all at the same time, and it was a lot worse than it was the first time. And so the investigation had been tipped off, and there had been some police involvement with domestic disputes and such. And as the report you could open source search would indicate, was that the contaminant, which was then a significant amount more of contaminant was introduced to the salsa. The salsa was then dispensed to more patrons at the same time in a busy meal service. So a lot more people got really sick really quick.
That's
fortunately,
crazy.
nobody died. Fortunately, nobody died. But again, there were economic impacts realized in addition to the public health impacts, and it was a retail level exposure to a active intentional adulteration.
Well, reading the reports on that from the Kansas Department of Health, there were two criminals that did this. One of them was sentenced to 87 months, and the other one, I think, got 10 years and was fined $250,000 or something, which actually seems low to me when you're talking about that many people that you're doing that much harm to. I mean, I feel like it's not really considered terrorism in the same way. If a person was going around like the knife attacks in Israel, for instance, often don't cause fatality, but they cause a lot of harm.
Right.
Do you think food defense incidents are prosecuted as severely as they should be?
Well, fortunately, there haven't been that many adulteration whereby lots of people have been taken ill. And the instance in Kansas, for example, was a domestic dispute where the intent, I believe, was not to make people sick in as much as to make the operator suffer the economic loss. So it might have been with the intent of the act rather than the outcome of the act, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Was it a husband-wife kind of a situation? Because that is
husband,
brutal.
wife, uncle, and dishwasher or something like that. Yeah.
Wow. So then what about the Texas one? Because the one in 2010 in Dalles County, this was actually a chemical poisoning and also it occurred incredibly rapidly, right?
Yeah, and that, I believe, if not for the Dalles County epidemiologist's office, they would not let this go. I was working FDA at the time, and there's an MMWR report as well where the contamination, the action of how it was contaminated was never determined, except for the fact that sodium azide was discovered to be in the iced tea urn, and sodium azide is a contaminant that is not expected to be present in a retail food establishment because it's part of what would be in an airbag, that would cause that explosive deployment of the airbag. And so that chemical being in a beverage in a restaurant just doesn't make sense.
So they never caught anyone for that?
I do not believe that anybody was ever apprehended.
Wow,
but that there were the symptoms were consistent with what would have been intentional adulteration, and it was, I believe it was months later, and it was blood work and labs. I don't know that they actually found the sodium azide in the iced tea, but through the food histories of what the patrons had consumed, and they all had a shared common exposure was the iced tea beverage.
Wow.
As a Southerner, I really I'm pissed off that they poisoned the iced tea.
I'll give up salad, but I will not.
That's right.
Give up iced tea.
That's right. Oh, it's really amazing. I mean, the other one you brought up was briefly was the horsemeat thing in Europe. So you were saying, I think that's not food defense, right? So what's that, and what's the difference?
Yeah, sensitive subject, because relative to what is it? What are we even talking about? A couple of years ago, where horse meat was discovered to be in place of ground beef, where it was an act of fraud, where there was a substitution of what was perceived to be, ground beef acceptable, the whole bit. Culturally, if that were to have happened here, think about the uproar that it would have had, and it was significant in the EU, anyway. But fraud in the sense that somebody was trying to make a dime on selling horse meat that was cheaper than ground beef, yet representing it as ground beef, so they were making money. The intent is not to make somebody sick. And the act of the fraudster is to perpetuate the fraud. They don't want to get caught. They want to keep doing it perhaps at lower levels or at a level that it's not going to be detected or not to draw any attention to themselves, such that that's an income stream, right? They're not looking to, make a political statement or kill anybody. So the difference between food fraud, where somebody's trying to make a dime and they want it to keep going, and food defense, whereby an act of intentional adulteration, there is an intent to do harm, to cause someone to become ill or worse, cause economic disruption or what have you. Somebody's got an axe to grind, or they've got a problem, or they're just trying to make a statement, or like the case in Michigan where somebody was mentally unstable and they believed that people were using the food supply to control his mind. So, yeah, there's a whole spectrum of food terms related to food defense. People use the term food security as well. Food security because of the connotation of securing the food supply, but food security in the sense of the World Health Organization infers access to an adequate nutritious food supply for a population. Has nothing to do with intentionally contaminating food. So back in 2002 and 2003 when we talked about food biosecurity, and then it evolved from food biosecurity over to food security, because it wasn't only bioterrorism, and then food security evolved into food defense. So there's lots of I read articles and I hear stories, and I could understand when folks are confused because of the similarity of the terms.
Right.
But they couldn't be more disparate if they tried. So food security is definitely not food defense.
So because as a customer, I think what I care about most is like, can I eat the meatballs at Ikea? Is that something that, so I guess if a person was committing fraud, and I guess this is in the weeds a little bit, but if you're committing fraud with food, but it leads to health outcome, does that turn you into a food terrorist? Does that move you from fraud to food defense, even if it's unintentional?
I think you just answered your own question. If it's unintentional and there's not a motivation to make it happen, but my only response, to go back to your IKEA point, was something that I learned last week. Those meatballs, if you're eating them on an unattended dresser that is not secured to the wall and it falls over, you could crush your meatballs.
That's true.
What's the real threat there?
IKEA is trying to kill us.
I don't want to get my meatballs crushed. That's like the last thing that I want, is for my meatballs to get crushed.
I think we may have just lost an IKEA sponsorship for this podcast.
Your ability to defend your meatballs would be to secure your dresser to the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's next? One thing that I really appreciated in your article about food defense for Food Safety Magazine was talking about how it should be combined into strategic planning and encouraging people to work on food defense, although it's voluntary. Is that something that corporations are starting to do, is to do these sort of food defense strategic plans? Yeah,
so that article was written, give me the date, was it 2012, 2011? Yeah, so it was written in 2012, so it was presented in 2013, and at that time, food defense was voluntary. So we were, as I was working at the FDA at the time, encouraging industry to work together, to collaborate, to share information and develop plans, to exercise those plans, and then to help to build that culture of food defense. So the dated nature of that article, because it was voluntary, is not where we are today. Now it's required, and we've got a 3-year period of compliance to comply by July of 2019. That is those businesses that are not exempt, and there are exemptions out there that folks could do their research on. But bottom line is it comes down to doing the right thing for the right reasons, not just to comply with the regulation. We want to protect our consumers, here at Pepsico, but as any food and beverage manufacturer would be in the same boat. They don't want anything bad to happen, and they don't want to have mass public health harm as a result of consuming their product. One person who is sickened or worse is too many. So we don't we don't want it to occur. So what do? We've got to, keep an open mind and work together and make sure that that chain of, everybody working together, it's only going to be as strong as our weakest link. So bringing others along, helping others to understand what we've learned, how others could improve and make changes based on experiences and sharing of best practices. Fortunately, we've not had to write any after-action reports, and I've read several of them from FDA's before I left FDA, thinking about what had happened and some of the outcomes and the lessons learned. I hate to do this, but it goes back to communication, because if you looked at the Lenexa, Kansas,
just rub it in.
It's going to come back to communication. That there was a disconnect between local law enforcement and local public health, that they knew that there was something going on with the operator, proprietor, or staff of that restaurant. And if they had shared that with local public health, they might have been able to have, encouraged some preventive controls or some mitigation strategies to be implemented at the facility, to make sure that somebody didn't have the ability to bring in a contaminant and poison their customers. But
yeah, I imagine that a challenge with this is that a lot of times the contaminant is something that occurs naturally, and so at first, in the first investigation, you think, oh, this is just a naturally occurring pathogen or bacteria. So that's probably what it caused. But like the example of Whole Foods, where someone noticed something that looked a little odd and reported it, and that kind of gave law enforcement a clue as to maybe this is something intentional. I mean, I would think, ground level staff, training them to identify things like this would be very helpful as a first line of food defense.
Yeah, just paying attention to your surroundings and basic awareness. I mean, at the manufacturing level, where we've got facilities with 30 persons with 35 and 40 years of experience, they kind of know the facility inside and out, backwards, like the back of their hand with their eyes closed, right? They're going to know something is going to feel wrong. It's going to look wrong. They're going to understand something's out of place. But if you look at a retail environment where you have staff turnover, I mean, look at one of every 6 jobs has something, a tie back to the food industry. And if you go to your local coffee shop or your whatever, your favorite little corner pizza place or deli shop, how many folks are in and out of there as employees on a regular basis? And how do you have a culture of awareness when they barely learned how to operate the cash register?
I was thinking about, this conversation has comforted me in 2 ways. Like, first about the sort of factories and the production and kind of the back end facilities and the security they have, and second, this rule to protect food against intentional adulteration, I think, is a great step that the FDA's done. But I mean, I can, to your point, I can think about it, at least a dozen open salad bars and iced tea dispensers like within a mile of here that I could just go contaminate with salmonella anytime I wanted to. I mean, I have like a bucket of salmonella in my basement. I could just take it out and start going to town. So why do you think that this doesn't happen more often on the retail front?
I don't have an answer to that question. I know there are many activities and efforts at the local public health level now that I was with when I was with FDA that have worked to encourage and educate and train local food operators as to good food defense practices. And you could go to fda.gov/food defense, and you could pull up some of the funded projects under the Innovative Food Defense Program, where entities are developing different resources to help retailers understand what to look out for. As to why it's not happened or why it hasn't occurred, I mean, go back to Tommy Thompson, 2002. What did he say? Come on, Mitch, you got to know the Tommy Thompson quote.
Eat more chicken. I don't know.
Right, while you're looking that up, as long as you're comforted by our discussion here this evening, that's all that matters, because I appreciate not only the ability to participate on this, but Mitch, it's been too long. I think the last time I saw you, you were sipping on a mint julep at a public health preparedness conference in Anaheim, if I'm not mistaken.
That's pretty much my life right there. If only. I'm still stuck on, what did Tommy Thompson say?
I think I found
it. Okay, what did
HHS Secretary says terrorist attack on food supply would be, quote, so easy to do.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that
for the life of me? Yeah. Do you have the full quote there?
No, I don't have.
This is like testing our Google ability. We've got to get faster.
Dead air.
We're just gonna have dead air while we Google like crazy.
While you look that up, Mitch.
I, for the life of me, cannot understand why terrorists have not, attacked our food supply.
It does kind of seem like the perfect. Should we be talking about this? I suddenly had a case of. But it seems like it's a lot of these things are naturally occurring. It could be difficult to detect.
I'll tell you. Well, this is what I'll say. I remember when I worked in Florida, when I first started working for environmental health, which was a couple years after Jason did. That was first. I was worried about water, and with water, they say the secret to pollution is dilution because there's so much water, and it really works on it. And I was struck that even in the Dalles case, they did need some kind of a lab capacity there to set it up. And most of the things you can do really with household things are chemical things like these restaurants that we talked about. And they did take a significant amount of contamination, and they had to be very localized, and they had to be repeated. So although it is really dramatic, it is also not that scalable, right? The scalable way to attack the food supply is through a food defense attack in a warehouse, in a factory, in one of these big back-end facilities. And that's why I think this focus on security is so important in the production aspect of it. Yeah, and as it ties into, as you were talking earlier, strategic planning, and we could be as detail-oriented as we'd like to be or as we need to be, or regulatory compliance aside, enterprise risk reduction aside, all you could do is trail risk. I mean, what's the reality of, operating in a bubble, living in a bubble? And your question earlier, do I go out to eat? I mean, my wife used to give me a hard time when we'd go out to eat, and I'd point out to her that the server had his finger in the salad bowl, or he was holding the glass wrong. And I was young, I was in environmental health, and after you realize there's risk that you tolerate in your life every day. So while it might not be a sound public health practice to be serving a bowl of salad to me and bringing it with your fingers all over the lip of my bowl, where does that pale in comparison to the risk of, getting behind the vehicle and not knowing that somebody driving at me is impaired, being aware, knowing your surroundings, paying attention to what's going on every day. So I take my personal life, it's blended with my professional life, with my life experiences, as we all do. It makes us who we are. And, it's amazing. My daughter, she's 10 years old, and we're packing a bag to go to the pool the other day. And I said, Liv, I already got a towel. She goes, I don't know, I'm just going to get another one. I said, why? She goes, just in case. And so, she knows what I do, and I always leave home with my black bag. I got 3 days worth of food in my black bag. My family doesn't need to know that. I do. It's just the way that I roll, And so I could see the impact that what I've done and what I do, how it affects my family. But is it a bad thing that my daughter is prepared when we go to the pool with an extra towel? You know what I mean? But it's building blocks. These are life lessons, and someday it'll make for a good story to sit by the fire and think about, how did I get to where I am here when I'm 55,
Absolutely.
But mint tulips, tell me about this. How did that happen?
Well, okay, I'll tell this story. So I'm from Georgia, and when I moved up to New York City, the first bar I went into, I was there with a friend of mine who was a couple of decades older than me, and he was like, I'm so glad you're in the city. I want to buy you a drink. And I went up to the bar, and I was like, I'd like a mint julep. And he was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to make you that drink.
What?
Did you get slapped? You're like, get out.
Never set foot here again. There's nothing wrong with a mint julep. If it's above 90 degrees, you should only drink mint juleps. That's what I think about the world.
I was impressed. That's all. And, I hate to do this to you, but we've come to this point in your show, and your favorite 5-letter word hasn't been said yet.
Uh-oh.
Oh, now I'm back on the Tommy Thompson thing.
No, this is lightning. This is your personal lightning round. You ready? It's your favorite 5-letter word. Starts with the letter D.
Drinks?
Come on.
It's not drinks. That's
Dukes?
six letters. Dukes that's good. Actually, I don't think that's what he's thinking of.
I don't know. What is it, Jason?
He's really waiting.
Drones.
Drones. Oh, of course.
Oh my God. You know,
Drone watch.
we haven't done drone watch.
So I'm
segment.
sorry. I don't even know why I went there. I had it as one of my notes. It was the only thing that I didn't have a check next to, and I'm like, how the hell am I going to bring up a drone? In
well, let me ask this, and then we'll move. We're going to hit you with our lightning round in a second. But here's my drone tie-in. You ready? I have this segue, which is that Amazon, Walmart are looking at drones in their warehouses in terms of sorting and delivering food supplies, right?
You're out of control.
including their food supplies, right? This is what Walmart is investing millions and millions of dollars in, having drones work in their warehouses to sort supplies for shipment, including food supplies. So I guess this is what I'm going to ask about, which is the overlap of cyber attacks with food threats. Because all the food security that we've put in there, maybe I'm reaching, I don't know, but all this effort on food security we've put in there is undercut as soon as we have an electronic system taking care of all of it. So this is what I'm asking, Jason. Can someone hack a drone and poison my iced tea that way in a factory?
Or your mint julep.
Oh, man. You mean food defense practices, not food security practices, right?
Right, that's right.
Okay.
I'm learning the vocabulary.
Could somebody hack a drone and intentionally contaminate your iced tea?
That's right.
It's an oddly specific question. That's a very specific.
That's what I care about. That's what we're focusing on.
Very specific.
Let's think. It depends if you're going to be at like a 4th of July festival or a parade where there's going to be 100,000 people and there might be a big target. But I'm not sure if anybody's looking to get your iced tea, Mitch.
All right.
I don't think so.
Well, I'll take that.
All right. Well, speaking of lightning rounds, so we have a couple lightning round questions for you, Jason. Are you ready?
It's entirely possible that I might get these wrong, but that's okay.
That's okay. There's no right or wrong. There's no pressure.
They're not at all fact-based.
One word, one sentence answers. Okay. What's your favorite hazard?
Any threat to the earth.
Pandemic.
Pandemic.
Oh,
okay,
that's right.
Good. That is
my
a good
favorite
one.
board game too.
This may be it's maybe the same answer. What hazard scares you the most? This is a light
and I actually had I rehearsed these and I thought through it, but
wait, you rehearsed these?
Well, I was doing my homework. I was getting ready and thinking. I was going to try to not say volcano 5 times. I was thinking it's not a one-word answer. It's unvaccinated children.
Oh, that is a really good one.
It is really that is really scary.
That is
actually.
very scary.
Especially when if you A, have kids, and B, you know that vaccination is a 100% thing.
Right.
It's a scary thing.
It is. Yeah, especially when you have young kids that have yet to be vaccinated.
Right.
Oh, my God.
Now I'm scared, man.
Good one. What's the first major disaster you worked?
Flooding in Connecticut.
Okay. Good one. Good standard.
Mm-hmm.
Dream emergency management or disaster response job. If you could have any kind of job in this industry.
I'm sorry, you're asking the senior
I
manager
know.
for global food defense that
you
question.
You could just read your job title.
Yeah, I'm living the dream today, bud. I'm really loving this.
That's right. If only you had a mint julep right now, you'd be there.
A few years ago, I might have thought about something along the lines of a commissioner of FDA Food and Drug. But you know what? I really like what I'm doing here now, and I feel I've got an opportunity to make an impact. And like I said at the beginning of our discussion here. So
well, I guarantee you the FDA commissioner doesn't get free chocolate pretzels.
Yeah, at least not ethically. We're going to throw her in jail if she does.
So, yeah, sometimes, as the holiday season comes around and we start producing some of our limited time offerings, and my kids know if I'm going into the office, I work from home regularly and I travel, and I'll go. We've got a couple of offices near home, and my son will be like, you going to be able to bring anything home today? And I'm like, I'll have to see what I can do. And it's chocolate covered pretzels. It's like gold. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That's it. All I've
Wait a
ever,
second. It would be chocolate covered rolled gold. There you go.
Oh,
Seriously.
all I've ever been able to get my kids are Medical Reserve Corps T-shirts. It's really not the same level of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's doesn't compare. So favorite disaster movie?
Oh, crazy. We were watching this the other night after what had been going on, but it's kind of corny, Twister.
Ah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
That's
right.
That's a really good one.
That's right.
Cow.
Can you think
Cow.
at the end of that movie where they strapped in, my wife and I were sitting there watching it, and they strapped into those bars in that barn, and he goes, here, strap into this. They go 30 feet in the ground. I'm thinking to myself, 30 feet in the ground? What?
Yeah. What kind of barn? That's pretty amazing.
But it was retro lame, but it was so cool because, that's all right. It was a good movie.
Yeah.
Best acronym in your field?
Well,
Best/worst.
FIMCS. What was the acronym for your? Just so I'm clear on it.
the FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act.
There we go.
FSMA's pretty good.
I like FSMA.
So I'll give a shout out to my buddy Corey Frank in Iowa, and I'll say that my favorite acronym was we were at a NEHA conference and we shanghaied the if that's not a politically incorrect term, I don't know what is, but we commandeered the badge making machine and we created badges that we were all from the Iowa Center for Urban Preparedness. And so the acronym was ICUP.
ICUP, yes,
Can I
of
just
course.
say, I've never had as much fun at a conference as I had at the National Environmental Health Association conference. Those were the best times.
That is really fun.
Yeah,
we had some real good times.
They really, it's the
Fun
Corey
with
Frank
badging
man.
machines.
All right.
Last one, your favorite piece of emergency management gear?
I used it at the top of the show. I got my handy dandy Swiss tool right here, man.
That's a great one.
I've had a half a dozen of these things confiscated from me in carry-on bags that I forgot that I stuffed it in there when I traveled previously.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're like, well, for $37.95, you could go mail it home to yourself. And I'm like, nah.
Not worth it.
That's my Swiss. I used to have the one with the no, this is the Leatherman. I used to have the one with the I think it was the Swiss Pro, where it had a toothpick and a pen. It had a ballpoint pen on the side of it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that thing couldn't do. But if you don't have your Leatherman, you gotta get one. I wear it every day.
It's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for
so much for coming on tonight.
If people have questions or want to get more information from you, if people want to call you on the phone.
If people want to stalk you, Jason,
Yes.
how should they do that?
Are you on Twitter? Are you on LinkedIn? What's the best way people could...
I'm on LinkedIn. That would be the best way for people to find me.
So look for Jason.
BASHURA.
You've also got some pretty good articles out there too that if people want more information just about food defense and kind of the issues you deal with, I highly recommend reading those.
And we'll try and put them on our website too
Yeah.
in the next.
If we ever update the website again.
If we update the website,
As Mitch looks at me.
then we will post
Then we will do it.
the things on the website.
And if we've got an opportunity to collaborate on that Rick Rescorla Award, that'd be humbling for me to be able to help resurrect that. And if you guys are able to, then perhaps your listenership could help us with an email campaign to reinstate the Rick Rescorla Award for Resilience.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's bring it back. It's certainly well deserved.
Absolutely. We'll tweet it. We'll put out whatchamacallit? What do you call those things? A petition to
Change.org.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is that really where you do that? Is that a real thing? Change.org?
It is a real thing.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then
Maybe we can do something like
so
that.
thanks so much, Jason, for coming on.
Mitch, it's great to reconnect with you. Andrew, it's nice to talk with you, and I look forward to future podcasts and learning from my colleagues in this world that we live in here today to try to reduce our risks and have some fun while we're doing it. So there you go.
Absolutely.
Rock and roll.
Thanks a lot.
All right, you guys, have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
So Jason's gone. Before we go, I wanted to just tell my favorite story from my time in environmental health.
Yeah.
Which is that one time I was at a Florida conference, and all these environmental health guys were talking about their worst food safety stories that they'd ever found.
Jeez.
And I was talking to this food inspector. I think he was from somewhere around Orlando or North Florida, and he had pictures with him. And he was like, one time I was inspecting this Chinese restaurant, and I went downstairs, and he started showing pictures, like flipping through them. He was just telling the story. And they had a violation of some kind, and I was walking through their basement, and they had like food preparation violation. And then I went in the back, and there were like two guys with machetes, and they were there with this line of rats that they'd killed. And they were there, and they were just chopping the heads off the rats, and then the tails, and then they were butchering the rats and cutting them up into chicken wings and putting them on the buffet bar upstairs.
Are you kidding me?
No. I was like, what happened? And he was like,
We issued him a ticket and left.
That's right. And then we had some chicken wings.
Oh my gosh. Please tell me that place got shut down.
I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure.
I will never
that it was
eat
shut
in Florida
down. But
again.
somewhere in this country, it is probable that some restaurant is serving you chicken wings that are actually
not
rats.
Really chicken wings.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, watch out for it. Be prepared.
I'll be prepared.
See something, say something.
Well, that does it. 2 weeks in a row. We did it.
That's right.
So if you enjoyed the episode, give us a call, 859-429-2731. If you didn't enjoy the episode, give us a call, 859-429-2731. Call and ask us questions. Tell us what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear less of. Tell us how you think Game of Thrones will end. Really anything. You can just talk to us.
You could just ramble on the voicemail for an hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
Your hopes, your dreams, your fears, all that stuff.
Conspiracy theories.
Just don't poison our iced tea. Never, ever
stay away from
poison
the
our iced tea.
Follow us on Twitter, Hazards Podcast. Email us, hazardspodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.
Duke's out! I may never eat again.